My name is Amelia, and I was living what appeared to be a perfect life. At least that's how it looked from the outside. My husband, Ethan, was everything a girl could wish for: handsome, loving, and incredibly supportive. We met during our college years, and it was practically love at first sight. We both felt an instant connection that quickly transformed into a deeply meaningful relationship. Oh, come on, Amelia. Let's go to that art gallery I was telling you about. Trust me, you're going to love it, Ethan would often say, enthusiastically pulling me into new experiences. You and your art galleries. Fine, let's go, I'd laugh. I loved his passion for art and life itself. He had a way of making everything seem beautiful and worthwhile. Eventually, Ethan proposed, and we had a wedding that was nothing short of magical. The venue was a gorgeous estate with sprawling gardens lit by the golden glow of sunset, and then by twinkling stars. Our friends and family cheered, their joy palpable as we sealed our vows with a kiss. As long as we both shall live, Ethan murmured, his eyes locked onto mine as if he were memorizing my soul. And beyond, I whispered back. That moment felt like a beautiful bubble where only the two of us existed. For a while, I let myself believe that this was it, the happy ever after that every girl dreams of. However, even a picture-perfect life has its shadows, and mine had a name. Carol, Ethan's mother. Right from the start, I could sense her disapproval. It was as though her eyes had this natural ability to scan me like an error message, searching for flaws she could magnify. So, Amelia, what is it that your parents do? She'd ask, trying to sound polite during one of our first family gatherings. My father's a mechanic, and my mom's a nurse, I'd reply. A mechanic and a nurse. How charming, she'd say, her words weighed down by a thick veneer of disdain. It wasn't just a question of social status or background. It was as if she thought I was fundamentally unsuitable for her son. While Ethan saw me as his equal, a partner to navigate life's ups and downs, Carol saw me as something far less flattering. She would scrutinize my every move, every decision, as if trying to spot some fatal flaw that would make me unworthy of Ethan's love. Despite this, I held on to the belief that love would conquer all obstacles. I was happy and deeply in love with Ethan. We had built a life together, bought a beautiful home, and were making plans for the future. But little did I know that the seed of discord that Carol had planted was about to grow into an insidious tree, its roots threatening to tear apart the life Ethan and I had lovingly built. So the years passed, turning the page to a chapter I never expected, beginning with what seemed like innocent visits from my mother-in-law. If only I'd known the dark turns that lay ahead. In the first couple of years of our marriage, Ethan and I delved deeper into our careers, navigated our shared ambitions, and eventually bought a house that seemed like something straight out of a romance novel. A charming 2-story home with a white picket fence and a garden we couldn't wait to fill with memories. We were on cloud 9, arranging furniture, selecting paint colors, and envisioning the many holidays we'd spend in our sanctuary. Just when it seemed like life was going perfectly, Carol started to visit more frequently. At first, these visits appeared to be well-meaning gestures from a mother who wanted to be a part of her son's life. Amelia, my mom's planning to visit this weekend, Ethan would announce. I know things have been a bit strained, but maybe she's coming around. I think it would mean the world to her if you were there, he'd say, his eyes filled with an optimism I wished I could share. Ethan, it's not that I don't want to get along with Carol. I do, but you know how these visits usually go, I'd reply, hoping he could hear the trepidation in my voice. I know, babe, but families are complicated. Let's give it another try for us, he'd say, hugging me tightly as if he could squeeze out the worry and apprehension. The problem was, these visits rarely occurred when Ethan was home. More often than not, Carol would find a way to visit when he was away on business trips. This left me alone to face her scrutiny, making the walls of my dream home feel like they were closing in on me. Carol's visits had a pattern. She would ring the doorbell, and I'd open the door with a pasted-on smile, hoping against hope that this time things would be different. Carol, it's so lovely to see you. Can I take your coat? I'd offer, attempting to fill the awkward silence that always accompanied her arrival. I'm fine. Where's Ethan? She'd snap, not even pretending to be interested in pleasantries. He had a business meeting out of town. He should be back by tomorrow. I'd respond, trying to keep the atmosphere light. But her next words would always weigh down the room. Just making sure my son's life is in good hands. She'd say, her eyes scanning our home like a detective searching for clues, her words dripping with double meanings that even a naive ear couldn't miss. Her words misinterpreted, they stuck with me, echoing in my ears long after she had left, fueling my anxiety about the next inevitable visit. It got to the point where the sound of the doorbell would make my heart race as I braced myself for another round of passive-aggressive comments and thinly veiled insults. I couldn't shake the sense that Carol's visits were more like reconnaissance missions than attempts to connect. It felt like she was gathering information, building some sort of case against me, though for what, I couldn't say. But that unspoken tension bubbled beneath the surface, a dormant volcano that I knew could erupt at any moment. I just didn't know how or when until the day came that transformed those fears into a horrifying reality. Ethan had just left for a week-long business trip, and I found myself alone in our house. That solitude was a double-edged sword. On one side, I relished the quiet moments, the chance to focus on my own interests, read a book, or have a pampering self-care evening. But the flip side was the looming possibility of another visit from Carol. It felt like an impending storm, an unspoken threat that could materialize at any moment. When the doorbell rang on the third day after Ethan had left, my heart sank. There she was, Carol, standing on the doorstep with a smile that seemed as forced as my own. It was almost like she knew she had me cornered, like a cat relishing its captured prey. Carol, what a pleasant surprise. Would you like to come in? I greeted her with as much warmth as I could muster. Of course, Amelia. Where else would I be? She said, stepping inside and looking around as if she owned the place. I was just about to make some tea. Would you like a cup? I asked, trying to steer us towards something resembling normalcy. I didn't come for tea, she replied, her voice curt, avoiding eye contact, her gaze drifting around our living room, inspecting the furniture, the walls, and even the family photos we had lovingly arranged. Ah, I see. Is there something specific you wanted to talk about? I pressed, my palms sweating, sensing the discomfort hanging in the air like a thick fog. Not particularly. I just felt like I should check in on my son's home while he's away. A mother worries, you know, she said. The implication was clear. She was here to assess, perhaps even judge, how well I was taking care of the life her son had built. It's kind of you to worry. But I assured you everything's fine here. I responded, my voice cracking despite my best efforts to sound confident. We'll see about that, she murmured almost to herself as she sat down on our sofa, making herself at home yet somehow making the home feel less like my own. The atmosphere was so thick with tension that it felt like wading through quicksand. Each second stretched into a minute, each minute into an agonizing eternity. I suggested we have dinner, offered to show her the new renovations we had made to the guest room, and even brought up the possibility of watching a movie together. But each suggestion was met with resistance, passive-aggressive comments, or cold silence. As the evening wore on, I could feel my own walls closing in on me mentally and emotionally. This was my home, the place where I should feel the safest and most comfortable. Yet Carol had turned it into a battlefield fraught with hostility and silent judgment. With a deep breath, I decided to steer the situation towards some resolution. Carol, since Ethan is away, why don't you stay the night? It's getting late, and I've already prepared the guest room. I suppose that would be sensible, she said, finally breaking her reticence. But as I moved to grab her overnight bag, I couldn't shake the sense of impending doom. I knew something was about to happen, something that would shatter the uneasy peace we had been balancing on. What I didn't know was just how devastating that something would be. Night had fallen, and the house was quieter than ever, as if it too sensed the impending turmoil. Carol had retired to the guest room, and I was left to my own devices, my thoughts a swirling tempest of unease and anticipation. Maybe I'm overthinking this, I muttered to myself as I headed up to the second floor to fetch some spare blankets for Carol. Ethan had always told me that I had a tendency to overanalyze situations. "You think too much," he'd say with a smile, pulling me into a hug. I wished he were here now to ease my fears and make me feel secure within these walls. Just as I was about to grab the blankets, I heard a loud slam from downstairs. My heart jumped to my throat. That wasn't just a door closing. That was the sound of finality, of something coming to an end. Shaking off my apprehensions, I raced downstairs, calling out, "Carol, is everything all right?" But the only reply was an overwhelming smell of gas filling the air. I rushed to the kitchen and found the door leading to it closed. Pulling at the handle, I realized it was locked. Panic surged through my veins. My mind was screaming frantically. I turned and dashed to the living room, my eyes falling on the window. Without a second thought, I picked up a decorative statue from a side table and hurled it at the glass, shattering it into a spiderweb of broken shards. I climbed out, not caring about the cuts I received from the fractured glass. My mind was singularly focused on getting away, on getting help. The night air was biting, but I felt none of it as I sprinted to the nearest police station. My breaths were shallow, my heart pounding like a drum. The reception area was stark, a lone officer sitting behind the desk. I must have looked like a madwoman, but I didn't care. "Officer, you have to come with me. Someone's trying to burn down my house, and I think it's my mother-in-law," I gasped, my words tumbling over each other. He looked taken aback, but wasted no time. "All right, ma'am, let's go. I'll call for backup on the way." As we drove back to my house, I felt a mixture of relief and dread. Relief that I was no longer alone in this nightmare, and dread for what we might find. My thoughts kept drifting to Carol. Could she really go this far? What had I done to deserve this level of malice? The sight that greeted us as we turned onto my street confirmed my worst fears. My beautiful home was engulfed in flames, a monstrous blaze devouring what was once a symbol of love and unity. Firefighters were already at the scene, doing their best to combat the inferno. The officer turned to me, his eyes filled with a complex mix of sympathy and disbelief. "We need to start an investigation immediately. If what you're saying is true, this is a serious criminal offense." "I know, officer. I know," was all I could say as I watched the place I had once felt safe in reduced to ashes and embers. And as for Carol, she had vanished into the night, leaving behind only destruction and betrayal. It was clear that this was the point of no return, the event that had irrevocably shattered not just my home, but my trust in any lingering hope for family unity. The war had escalated into a battle, and I knew then that there could be no peace until justice was served. In the aftermath of the fire, as investigators sifted through the ashes of what used to be my life, the emotional weight was unbearable. Ethan cut his business trip short and rushed home, his face a mask of disbelief and concern when he saw the smoky ruins of our dream home. But it was when I told him about Carol's visit, the locked door, and the smell of gas that his expression changed into something I had never seen before, a mixture of deep hurt and betrayal. "Amelia, are you certain it was my mother?" Ethan asked, his voice tinged with desperation, as if clinging to the hope that this was all a terrible misunderstanding. "Ethan, I wish it weren't true, but who else would lock the door and leave the gas on? I'm scared, Ethan." "What if she tries something else?" I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. "God, I can't believe this is happening. I trusted her, Amelia." "She's my mom," Ethan muttered, his eyes distant, grappling with the harsh reality. Before we could further digest the magnitude of what had happened, the police called us in to make official statements. We walked into the police station, the gravity of the moment sinking in. This was the point of no return. Once we took this step, our lives would be irrevocably changed. "Mrs. Amelia, can you recount what happened the night of the incident?" The investigator asked as we sat in the sterile environment of the interview room. I did my best to recall every detail, every moment that led to the horrifying event. She came to visit. It wasn't uncommon, but this time was different. She knew Ethan was away. And then the smell of gas. And then the locked door. I recounted, my voice shaky. And you're sure it was Carol who locked the door? The investigator pressed. I can't prove it. But the house was fine before she came. And she was the only other person there. I said, meeting the investigator's gaze with grim resolve. Mr. Ethan, do you have anything to add? The investigator turned to Ethan, looking defeated. Ethan sighed deeply before speaking. As much as it pains me to say this, Amelia has no reason to lie. We need to find my mother and get to the bottom of this. Days turned into weeks as the investigation continued. The tension between Ethan and me was palpable, not because we doubted each other, but because we were both grappling with the enormity of what had been done and by whom. The foundation of our family had been shattered, and we were struggling to pick up the pieces. Finally, the day came when the police had enough evidence to arrest Carol. When the handcuffs clicked around her wrists, it was as if years of tension, dread, and fear had culminated in that moment. Ethan, what are we going to do now? Can we really move on from this? I asked, a heavy weight lifting off my shoulders, but leaving behind a void filled with questions and uncertainties. I don't know, Amelia, Ethan said, wrapping his arms around me. But whatever happens, we'll face it together. As we stood there, I knew that this was just the beginning. There would be trials, both legal and emotional. Lies would unravel and truths would be laid bare. But for the first time, I felt like we could finally confront this dark chapter in our lives and turn the page, even if what lay on the other side was unknown. We would face it as we had faced all things, united, even if broken. The courtroom was stifling, an arena of hushed whispers and unspoken judgments. When the judge announced the sentence, 6 years for attempted murder and arson, there was a collective gasp, a release of the tension that had built up over the weeks of the trial. Carol, for her part, looked neither remorseful nor surprised, but her eyes met mine for a brief second, and in them, I saw a glimmer of something I couldn't quite place. Regret, perhaps, or maybe just the realization that she had lost. As much as this verdict brings some closure, the family is shattered, possibly beyond repair, said Ethan as we exited the courthouse, a throng of reporters clamoring for comments. Yes, the family is broken, but not us, Ethan. We'll find a way to heal, even if it takes time, I replied, feeling the urge to reassert the strength of our partnership amidst the ruins of our larger family dynamic. The car ride home was one of the most uncomfortable experiences of my life. Words hung in the air like invisible barriers we didn't quite know how to navigate. Finally, Ethan broke the silence. Amelia, do you think you'll ever be able to forgive her? I'm struggling to even understand her, let alone forgive her, he confessed, his grip tightening on the steering wheel. Ethan, forgiveness is not about her. It's about us. It's about not carrying this heavy burden for the rest of our lives, but understanding why she did it. I don't know if I'll ever get there, I responded, my eyes focused on the road ahead, both literally and metaphorically. We have to rebuild, Amelia. We've lost a home, but we can't lose each other. Where do we even start? Ethan asked, his voice tinged with despair. We start with a fresh slate. We've been through the worst life has to offer, and we're still standing. Maybe a bit bruised, but united, I said, feeling a newfound resolve take hold. Weeks passed, and we temporarily moved into a small apartment while the insurance issues were sorted and our home was rebuilt. I couldn't set foot on the old property without feeling a surge of emotion, so we decided to sell it. Too many memories, both good and bad, were entangled in those walls. It was time for a new beginning.